Namaskaram, everybody. It is my pleasure today to have Nitin Sridhar with us to talk. He is got a degree in civil engineering and has worked in the construction field. He's also a writer and has written on issues ranging from development, politics, social issues, religion, spirituality, and ecology. He's the chief curator of Advaita Academy, dedicated to the dissemination of Advaita Vedanta. He was previously editor of India Facts, a portal on Indian history and culture. He is based in Mysuru, Karnataka. His first book, Musings on Hinduism, provides an overview of various aspects of Hindu philosophy and society. His book, Samanya Dharma, enunciates upon general tenets of ethics as available in Hindu texts. His latest book, Esopanishad, an English commentary, is an English translation and commentary on one of the prominent Hindu texts. However, his most widely read book is Menstruation Across Cultures, a historical perspective, which examines menstruation notions and practices prevalent in different cultures and religions across the world. Over to you, Nitin. We'd like to hear from you.
Uh, Thank you. Can I share my screen now? I can
Yes.
see the option. Okay, yeah. I'll share it from time to time. Thank you again for inviting me for today's talk. I'm very happy, especially on this auspicious occasion of Navaratri, celebrating Divine Mother, celebrating Shakti, and very happy to be here. So with this, let me straight away start with my short talk, so to speak. Uh, it will be on Goddess Chandika, a Vedantic perspective. Basically, it is a bit different from what many others perhaps have already spoken, and many others will be speaking in the coming days. We all connect with the Divine Mother in her different forms as Kali, as Lalita, as Lakshmi, Saraswati, and that connection has a very, when it comes to practice and when it comes to sadhana, it has a major element of bhakti in it, and an element of mantra sadhana in it, and so that is how it is the Shakta upasana is understood, and rightly so. But of course, in today's talk, it will be a bit different. I would be trying to understand Durga Saptashati, one of the most important texts of Shakta Upasana, one of the most important Hindu text itself as a whole, to understand the Shakti, to understand Devi, to understand how things happen in one's spiritual journey. So this would be how I would be approaching, I would be enunciating upon in this talk. And it would be based upon my small, short booklet I wrote a few years ago titled Chandika. And you can see in my virtual background cover of the book. So the talk will be based on this work, wherein I analyze, I mean, several questions. Basically, what I'll be trying to answer the questions in this talk is simply this: that when we speak of Shakti, when we speak of Devi, when we speak of sadhana, and when we read stories, especially when we read accounts in Puranas, Itihasas, and texts like Durga Saptashati, uh, often we ask a question that how is that relevant to us as an individual, as in an individual spiritual journey? uh, there is the stories, the accounts. For example, in the Durga Saptashati, there is accounts of Devi um, basically slaying several asuras and rakshasas, and which all are true, because in Hindu Dharma, Devata is not a metaphor. Devi is not merely a metaphor or merely an object of meditation, is not merely an imagined entity or merely a form. Devi or any Devata for that matter is a real entity, is more real than us, is a real personality. And whatever our Puranas and other texts say about these cosmic happenings, they are really cosmic happenings. Yes. However, they have been given to us in the form of these texts, in the form of this Upasana text for a particular reason. And I try to explore those reasoning and what do they stand for us as an individual sadhaka, and what do they represent to us at the individual level, and how they can assist us in in our upasana, in our sadhana, in the spiritual progress. And I do this from a Vedantic perspective, or more properly from a Upanishadic perspective, and I try to map the the the, the account of Devi in the Durga Saptashati, which is the account of exploits of goddess Chandika in different forms of her, to map it into the Upanishadic teachings. So with this brief preamble, so to speak, I'll just start my PowerPoint presentation. Is this visible?
Yes, Nitin, it is.
Yes, I'm able to see.
Okay. Let me just start the slideshow. So, first, very brief about Navratri. We all celebrating the 9 nights of Devi. It's a celebration of Shakti and her diverse manifestations. And we just had 2 days back Mahalaya Amavasya, which marked the beginning of the Devi Paksha, a Paksha wherein it is believed that the Divine Mother descends upon this earthly realm. And what it means for a sadhaka is that this is the best time to perform upasana of the Devi, to worship her, to do a sadhana, small or big, doesn't matter, of her, to spend time in contemplation of Devi, because it is the best time to connect ourselves with the Devi, whatever be the form. It may be Kali, it may be Lakshmi, Saraswati, whatever may be the form. But it is especially a time to connect with certain particular aspects of Devi as well. For example, the Kali and her varied manifestations. We have different upasana kramas also that is practiced across India. Different kinds of upasana methods that are practiced. So, but in short, Navaratri is an ideal time for celebration and worship of primordial divine Shakti, who goes by many names, and most important of them is Chandika. So, since divine Shakti is infinite, of course, Mother, that's why manifests in various forms. So, as I said, the different sampradayas have different upasana kramas for worshipping during Navaratri. For different forms of Chandika, to be more precise, if I have to say. But who is Chandika? That is something we will be seeing. Who is Chandika, and what does her account given in Durga Saptashati has a relevance for us sadhakas? I just mentioned different ways of worshipping Chandika. For example, one of the way is to worship the 9 days, the Navadurgas. Day one is we worship Shailaputri as the daughter of Himalaya, and the day two as the Brahmacharini, as a young girl, a Kanya, and who is practicing Brahmacharya in Brahmacharya Avastha. And then there is Chandraghanta, wherein we worship her as a grihastha and as a kushmanda, which stands for motherhood, which stands for pregnancy actually. And there are of course different meanings of it. And Skandamata as motherhood, Katyayani, Kalaratri, Siddhidatri. So this is one upasana krama that is present. And another method of worshipping is 10 days as 10 Dasha Mahavidyas, Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvneshwari, Chinnamasta, Bhairavi, Dhumavati, Bhagalamukhi, and Matangi and Kamala. And within the Durga Saptashati itself, we find the presiding deities as these 3 goddesses, the great goddesses, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. Just a brief about Durga Saptashati, which is also called as Chandipata. It's a Patha, Chandi Patha, Patha of Chandi, or Devi Mahatmya, the glory of the Devi. It is usually called Saptashati because it contains 700 verses. So, and this text appears in the Markandeya Puranam, wherein Rishi Markandeya narrates three separate accounts of Devi Chandika's fierce battles with different asuras and rakshasas. So basically, these are three different battles or three different accounts of Devi at different points of time, and hence they are arranged as Pratama Charitra, the first Charitra, the first account, the Madhyama Charitra, the second account, and Uttama Charitra, the final account. And there is a rationale behind this arrangement, why the Pratama Charitra comes first and why the Madhyama Charitra is in the middle and why the Uttama Charitra is in the last, and we will see that as we proceed with this presentation. And the whole account basically is about how Devi Chandika, the primordial Shakti, in her most fiercest aspect, she destroys various asuras, the rakshasas, everything bad, evil, negative in the universe, and protects the righteous, protects the sadhus, protects those in the path of dharma, and helps the devotees cross the ocean of samsara sagara, as they say. So the story or the account or however you see it, when I mention story, or I do not mean that it is merely metaphorical. I do not mean it that it is mythological. I am deliberately not using any of these loaded terms like myth, legend, or history, because each of them is a loaded term and has a specific meaning. But Durga Saptashati is much beyond them. It is at one level history, but it is history which goes beyond the conventional definitions of history, wherein we tend to understand things using archaeological and other such evidences. This is history that is beyond the confines of the normal history. It is mythology in a original sense that myth was used as an account of how account of a, divine entity or a exceptional human person, not in the sense that we use as mythology as something false. So this is a story, this is a account of Devi basically, which happened at very cosmological level, at a level that is not directly accessible to us, which is Atindriya. So therefore, because it's Atindriya, beyond our senses, beyond our mind, beyond our pratyaksha, that is direct perception and other sources of pramana, the only way to know it is through Shastra in the form of Puranas that we have, and we can neither verify it nor uh, falsify it, and that is why it is, by definition, it is swata pramana. That is the Hindu view of understanding, that we have the Shastras are swata pramana, so they are valid on their own. So we have to take that it is a true account, and no questions asked whether in what way it is true. It is metaphysically true, it is mythologically true, it is historically true. Those questions are not useful for a devotee, for a upasaka. For us, the Devi is real, the accounts are real, and that is enough. We don't need to ask whether it is really historical or not. That is misleading and takes us away from our sadhana patha. So, with this, next, let us move on to what actually the Durga Saptashati says, because we will be concentrating more on the Vedanta mapping. We will not spend too much time on the actual story. Anybody can go read Durga Saptashati. Wonderful translations are present, especially by Gita Press. It's in English and Hindi and other languages also. So it's a wonderful text. I suggest everybody to read it. Everybody to do a parayana of texts like Durga Saptashati, Lalita Sahasranama, etc. During this Navratri. It is very wonderful, very auspicious thing to do. So basically, what is this account given in Durga Saptashati? The Pratama Charitra, the first account, is the account of Mahakali, a particularly fierce aspect of Devi Chandika, and how she destroys two asuras called named Madhu and Kaithava. The story is about when Narayana is asleep, and from his ears are born Madhu and Kaitaba, and then they try to eat up or destroy Brahma, who is the representative of the Veda. And then Brahmaji does stuti of Mahakali, stuti of Devi, who is also the Mahamaya, Yoga Maya. And then Mahakali wakes up Vishnu from his sleep, and due to her grace, Vishnu is able to defeat Asuras, kill the Asuras, Madhu and Kaitava. In this second or the Madhyama Charitra, it is story about how Devi Chandika as Mahalakshmi. She destroys the mighty Asura, Mahishasura, and his large army. It's a very big account, a wonderful account in the Saptashati. And finally, the largest portion of Saptashati is dedicated to the Uttama Charitra, the last part, about which is about how Devi Chandika in her aspect of Mahasaraswati manifests different forms, and as Mahasaraswati brings out different forms through those forms, she destroys a number of mighty Rakshasas and Asuras like Dhumralochana, Chanda, Munda, Raktabija, Nishumba, Shumba. Nishumba and Shumba are the major Asuras here, and their generals are others, Chanda, Munda, and others. You might know that one of the important names of Devi is Chamunda. This name comes because this is a name given for Kali herself, not the Mahakali, but Kali, as we normally understand. And Kali is called as Chamunda because she kills Chanda and Munda. She is the one who divorces Chanda and Munda. That happens in this Uttama Charitra. So, as I said, these Devis, the Asuras, they represent different things at different levels. The Asuras and Rakshasas represent both the cosmic forces and personalities which are beyond human empirical perception, as well as their counterparts within an individual, which binds an individual to the cycle of birth and death. So what this means is, the Asuras are not just metaphors, they are not just a representation of something. They're real cosmic forces, they're real personalities. If you read Mahabharata, for example, Sri Sukmankar in his meaning of Mahabharata, he says about how Mahabharata is basically an elaboration, an extension of the cosmic yuddha between Deva and Asuras, which is eternally going on, which is always going on. So there is a Deva Asura yuddha, even today it is happening. We simply don't realize it. It is happening here, it is happening in the cosmic level. So because it is beyond our human empirical perception, we do not see it directly, we do not realize it, we are ignorant of it. So these accounts are meant to understand that these things happen. But at the same time, a part of that, an aspect of that Sura Rakshasa, Deva Sura Yuddha also happens inside an individual through the different tendencies which are present inside us, of course. The good vasanas, the bad vasanas, and these there is a continuous struggle inside of us, especially when a sadhaka starts making some form of spiritual progress. Hundreds of obstacles suddenly erupt. These obstacles are also forms of manifestation of Asura Shakti, and it is through the Daivi Shakti, through the worship of Upasana of the Divine Mother, that these Asuras, internal Asuras, can be slayed, can be overcome, and we can attain the ultimate goal of moksha over the course of time. So basically, as I said, the various forms of Shakti who rids the universe of these Asuras and also destroys the Asuric manifestations within each individual, she grants us the ultimate liberation. So as they say, there is a famous statement in, I don't remember which text it is, perhaps in one of the Puranas or in one of the Tantric texts, which says, Yatha Brahmande Tata Pinde. What is in macrocosm, the same is also present in microcosm. So whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we learn at the cosmic level, it is also present in a microcosmic level inside each individual. So therefore, today's context, in today's basically in today's session, I'll be focusing on this, the individual aspect, a Jivatma's fight against the internal enemies, which in the Vedantic language is called as Arishad Varga, which we all know: Kama, Krodha, Mada, Matsarya, Moha, and all those things. That is the anger, attachment, delusion, and Mada, the pride, Matsarya, jealousy. So there are 6 such internal enemies according to Vedantam. According to Tantric Sampradaya, we have Ashtapashas, or 8 such internal enemies. There are overlapping between them. So basically, the Durga Saptashati can also be seen and the individual context as a jivas or jivatmas fight against this internal asuras or Arishad Varga in the quest for moksha. And it is in this perspective that we see the nuggets of Vedantic wisdom hidden in the legend of Chandika. So this is a very interesting perspective. I realized, and when I was studying Durga Saptashati a few years back, and I was reflecting upon that, suddenly one fine day I realized that, wow, there is this correlation, and I never realized this correlation before. So so then when I thought that, is it really there, that correlation, or whether it is merely an imagination of a coincidence, then I looked into the etymologies of various asuras. So the approach here is partly etymological as well. I looked into a name of etymological meaning of the asura names, and then when I looked into it, I directly was able to correlate it with one of the internal enemies, and the particular form of Devi, which is presiding over a particular charitra, I could correlate with the kind of upasana that is needed to overcome that enemy. So I will be from here on, I will be speaking about that. But before we go into that, I just want to just briefly give an introduction into what Vedanta is all about. I mean, just a brief primer, so to speak, on the basic concepts of Vedanta, because otherwise, if you were to map it without this understanding, it would be very difficult to understand. So Vedanta basically posits, I'm speaking it in a very layman perspective, not going into the very details and intricacies of Vedantic arguments, but in a very normal, everyday perspective, Vedanta basically posits moksha as the ultimate goal of life. Moksha simply means freedom from all kinds of bondage imposed by the empirical world, the body and the mind. So it is basically to free ourselves from the cycle of birth and death, the karmic cycle that is keep happening again and again and again. So the Upanishads assert that the root cause of all sorrow is the false identification of our real self, the Atma, with the body and mind. And this false identification causes an attachment to the empirical universe. Basically, it says that I, Atma, because when I speak of we usually connect it with our name, our body, our desires, our attachment to the world. So this is a result of a false identification. That is what Vedanta says. And it says that this false identification is in turn rooted in ignorance or avidya of the true nature of reality of our self or Atman. And this true nature is that Atman is not the body. Atman is distinct from the body. It is distinct from the mind. It is distinct from the causal entity. It is instead the very Brahman, which is unborn, free, blissful, and is the nature of Satchidananda, or Satyam Jnanam Anantam, existence, consciousness, and infinitude. As Shankaracharya says in Nirvana Shatakam, he says, Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham. I am the Chidananda Rupa. Chit, consciousness, Ananda, bliss, Shivoham, auspicious. Or in Brahmagyana Valimala, he says, Asangoham, 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 Puna Puna. I am unattached, 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 unattached to the physical body, unattached to the mind, unattached to the causal body. So, this is basically the Vedantic perspective. And the Vedanta further says that it is by discarding these false identifications of the real I or Atman with the body mind complex and the direct realization of the unity of Atma with Brahman, which is called as Brahmatma Aikyam or Atma Jnanam or Atma Sakshatkaram. This constitutes moksha. What it says is, since attachment to the world is based upon an ignorance, basic ignorance about real nature of reality, the freedom from the cycle of birth and death, the freedom from samsara, is a result of correct knowledge, a result of Brahmatma Aikya Jnana, that our Atma is distinct from the body, our Atma transcends the body-mind complex, and our Atma is actually in reality non-different from the universe. So, now let me again share my screen because this is important. Okay. So with this very brief account of what Vedanta is, basically what is needed for us is simply this, that moksha is the ultimate goal, and moksha by definition is Atma Jnana, the understanding of the real nature of the self and becoming established in that. And and Vedanta posits a three-tier process to attain that jnanam, to attain that moksha. First is we will go in a reverse manner to understand the three-tier process, not from the first to third, but third to first. Atma Jnanam, Vedanta says, is not possible without vichara. Vichara is self-enquiry. Basically, it's an inquiry into what is the true nature of self. That I said, self is distinct from the body, distinct from the mind, and distinct from the causal entity. Well, it is easy to state it as a simple postulate. When you really reflect upon it, there is lot of questions that arise from it. So, this self-enquiry is important, and it's actually a fourfold process called as Shravana Chatushtaya. The first is Shravanam, wherein you hear the Upadesha of the teacher about Brahmatma Aikya, Tattvamasi, Ayam Atma Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, this Upadesha. And then is Mananam. You reflect upon this Upadesha, and whatever doubts you get, you go back to your teacher, you get it solved. And once you're intellectually satisfied with this, then you practice Nididhyasanam. It is kind of a meditation, but it is distinct from meditation, but it is a kind of a meditation wherein you meditate upon your own self. You contemplate upon your own self. You contemplate upon the question of who am I in the language of Sri Ramana Maharshi. So this is basically Nididhyasa. And the result, the fruit of Nididhyasa is Atma Sakshatkara or Atma Jnana, wherein we finally realize that Atma is Brahman. I am Atma Brahman. The first, it was merely intellectual understanding, which is Paroksha Jnana, indirect knowledge. After Nididhyasana, one becomes truly established in that knowledge. The Aparoksha Jnana, Aparoksha Anubhuti, the direct realization, which is it is called briefly so. So, Atma Jnana is attained through Vichara. But to become eligible, to become competent to practice this Vichara, one needs to have what is called as Sadhana Chatushtaya, which is fourfold qualifications, fourfold competencies. Viveka, Vairagya. Viveka is discrimination between permanent and impermanent, which is Nitya, which is Anitya, which is Satya, which is Asatya, which is Mithya. And there is Vairagya, dispassion, And then there is a group of qualities called Shatka Sampatti, Sama, Dama, Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, etc. Basically, these are self-control mechanisms, the Indriya Nigra, the restrainment of the senses, restrainment of the mind, Ekagrasya, the one-pointed concentration, these comes under Shatka Sampatti. And then Mumukshutva, which is burning desire for liberation. Now, this sadhana chatushtaya that we spoke about, viveka, vairagya, etc., they cannot be attained unless one has two qualities. One develops two things. One is chitta shuddhi, the purity of the mind. The second is ekagra chitta, the one-pointed concentration. Purity of the mind refers to destruction of mental impurities, the Arishad Vargas that I spoke about. So we have to first remove these mental impurities, Arishad Vargas, from the mind. Only then we attain Chitta Shuddhi. Ekagra Chitta is also important because mind is like a monkey. It is always hankering upward after one or the other thing. When you sit, you close your mind for even 1 minute, then your thoughts are not still. You're always thinking something or the other. So you have to still the mind. You have to concentrate, develop one-pointed concentration, that is Ekagra Chitta. And how do we attain Chitta Shuddhi and Ekagra Chitta? The Shastras say the Chitta Shuddhi can be attained by practicing Karma Anushtana, Dharma Anushtana. That is by performing one Swadharma. As Gita says, Swadharmo Nidhanam Shreyaha. And Ekagra Chitta is understood, is got by practicing Bhakti, Upasana. Here, Bhakti does not merely mean what we commonly understand. It includes that devotion and external forms, internal forms of devotion, but it also includes meditation. The meditative parts of yoga, Patanjali Yoga also come under it. So, through dharma, karma, anusthana, practice of swadharma, one attains chitta shuddhi over the course of time, and by practice of bhakti or upasana or meditation, one attains ekagra chitta over the time. So put it in a different way, this dharma anushtana and upasana, which results in developing sadhana chatushtaya, is the first tier process of spiritual pursuit. And first and second tier, sorry. So the first tier is dharma anushtana to attain chitta shuddhi. The second is ekagra chitta developed through upasana, is a second tier. And after one attains sadhana chatushtaya through chitta shuddhi and ekagra chitta, then through the process of self-inquiry, we attain Atma Jnana, which constitute the final tier. So Vedanta is a three-tier process. Attaining the goal of Vedanta is a three-tier process. And we will see, as I said, the Dirgha Saptashati is arranged in Pratama Charitra, Madhyama Charitra, and Uttara Charitra, in that particular order for a particular for a reason. And that reason is that the Pratama Charitra deals with the first tier of upasana, first tier of sadhana, which is dharmanusthana. The second tier is in the Madhyama Charitra, and the third tier, the Vichara Marga, is in the third portion, the Uttara Charitra. I think it's already 8:30, so we have another 30 minutes. So hopefully I'll be able to go through it without rushing a bit much. So now mapping the legend of or account of Chandika, you must forgive me for using this legend and such terms. I already explained what is my view on the issue. Mapping the account of Chandika using Vedanta, the Pratama Charitra deals, as I mentioned earlier, with the killing of the Rakshasas Madhu and Kaitaba by Mahakali. Now, Madhu Kaitaba is very significant. In Sanskrit, Madhu means honey, and Kita means insect. Bha means resemblance. And, excuse me. Therefore, Madhu Kaitaba refers to having a resemblance to the nature of honeybee. What is the most important character of honeybee? They are known for their very hard work, continuous involvement in the collection of sweet honey. That is normally we consider that as a positive attribute, and it is positive attribute in our in the day-to-day sense. But there is an aspect to it that is not positive. What is it? This Madhukita, the honeybees, they allegorically, their activity of continuously striving to attain honey, they can be understood allegorically as representing the common human nature, which continuously involve in the pursuit of material happiness. The Madhu is material happiness. Kama and Artha Kama. I want house, I want family, I want kids, I want happiness, I want this, I want that. Without realizing that there is much more to life than just Artha and Kama. In the Hindu perspective, there is 4 Purusharthas. The higher Purusharthas are Dharma and Moksha. The lower Purusharthas are Kama and Artha in a conventional model. We don't realize this and we think that Artha and Kama is end of everything. So such people, I mean, most of us come under this definition. For us, we neither have desire nor have time. We have always have excuses to not to pursue spiritual goals, not to pursue dharma and moksha. This is nothing but a kind of a tamasic indulgence, which make people concentrate only on artha and kama, only on material mundane happiness, mundane pleasures, while completely ignoring the pursuit of moksha. Therefore, the Rakshasas, the Asuras, Madhu and Kaitava, they represent this tamasic inertia, this tamasic ignorance, tamasic turning away from higher pursuits of life, the pursuit of dharma and moksha. And Devi Mahakali facilitating the or slaying, you can say, or facilitating the death of Madhu and Kaitaba gives a clue regarding the process by which tamasic indulgence can be overcome. Mahakali, who is Mahakali? Mahakali is the personification of Kriya Shakti, the force of action that facilitates the performance of Dharma Anushtana, Nishkama Karma, and Karma Yoga, through which one can attain Chitta Shuddhi and Mumukshutva. As I earlier noted, Mumukshutva means intense, burning desire for moksha. Normally, people do not have desire for moksha. But by the application of Kriya Shakti, through the performance of Dharma, Swadharma Anushtana, through the performance of Nishkama Karma and Karma Yoga, one can attain that Mumukshutva. One can attain Chitta Shuddhi by removing the internal impurities such as Kama, Krodha, Moha, Lobha, etc. So this impulse of Mumukshutvam is what helps one to overcome the tamasic inertia which has turned away from moksha and instead direct the mind towards moksha. The impulse of Mumukshutva brought by Dharmanushtana using Kriya Shakti constitutes the antidote for tamasic indulgence in material pursuit. This is represented by Mahakali bringing about the destruction of Madhukaitava. And this is the gist of Prathama Charitra from a Vedantic perspective. But more importantly, I would like to say that this is the gist, take home value for an individual sadhaka, irrespective of the path. Our path may be Vedantic, our path may be Shakta, our path may be anything. But from the perspective of this, making a spiritual progress, I think this insight is very useful, that at the very beginning, whatever sadhana, mantra sadhana, whatever tantra sadhana you do, if it is not accompanied, which is not complemented by the practice of swadharma, by the practice of samanya dharma, then that sadhana will not yield a fruit beyond a limited level. That is why, for example, in the path of bhakti, in the path of yoga, in every path, you say, in Patanjali Yoga, in Bhakti Yoga, in Jnana Yoga, whatever be the path, the most basic aspects is Samanya Dharma. Satya, Ahimsa, Shaucha, Indriya Nigraha. You can refer my book, Samanya Dharma, on this. All this, for example, Patanjali Yoga has Yama and Niyama, which includes all these tenets. And Bhakti Yoga also has these tenets. Narada Bhakti Sutra mentions this. In Vedanta, of course, these tenets are important, as I just explained now. Therefore, Swadharma Anushtana, which includes practice of Samanya Dharma, the ethical tenets, as well as your own duties, the Vishesha Dharma. A duty, for example, a student will be different from a householder. A householder has a duty towards their spouses, duty towards their children, duty to uh, support the family with money and other resources to look after the children, to nurture them. Or a Brahmana has a different kind of duties. A businessman has a different kind of duties. So all this, we have to do all these duties to the best of our ability, with a bhavana that we are doing it in a nishkama bhava as far as possible. It is not easy, but at least we have to start doing something. So this is the first process. The first charitra represents the importance of Swadharma Anushtana, practicing of one's own Swadharma, which includes two components: the Samanya Dharma, which is ethical component, the Vishesha Dharma, the duty component, which is individual, changes from individual to individual based on our age, our location, our profession, our competency, our varna, our ashrama, and all those. Now, moving further, the second charitra, the Madhyama charitra, is about Mahalakshmi. She is the presiding deity of the second charitra. You read the Dhyana Shlokam. It's the Dhyana Shlokam of Mahalakshmi. And through various forms, various ways, the Mahalakshmi slays Mahishasura. It's a big chapter. Mahisha stands in Sanskrit for buffalo. And buffalo is a representative of dullness and ego. You can compare how we perceive what is our first impressions of a cow versus our first impression of a buffalo. When we see a buffalo, the first thing comes to our mind is dullness. And when we think of Mahishasura, the second thing that comes to our mind is ego. So Mahishasura is an embodiment of dullness, pride, ego, and all related tamasic and rajasic forces, rajasic qualities that are inside each individual. Mahalakshmi is the personification of Ichha Shakti. Mahakali was personification of Kriya Shakti. The antidote for inertia is action, which is Kriya Shakti. The antidote for ego and dullness is Ichha Shakti, the power, the force of will, the power of the mind. It is the power of the mind alone which can take you out of laziness, take you out of dullness, pride, ego, etc. So Ichha Shakti is the power of will, the power of the mind, and it is the means to slay this demon or slay this asura of dullness and pride. In practical terms, what does it mean? The account points towards the necessity of upasana, concentration and meditation, which can be utilized to overcome mental dullness, laziness, pride, etc. How and why? Ichha Shakti, how do we harness Ichha Shakti? How do we strengthen the mind? The only way to strengthen the mind is through meditation, is to contemplation. And that contemplation and meditation can happen in multiple number of ways. You can contemplate on keeping a lamp in front of you. You can contemplate on the image of a deity, on the form of a deity. You can contemplate on multiple number of ways that different yoga texts and bhakti texts speaks about. So whatever way that you contemplate, you perform upasana, even bhakti, the shravana and kirtana, they are all forms of contemplation, wherein you contemplate on the story of the God. The shravana is the accounts of the God, hearing the accounts, the leela of the God. Kirtana is singing about the leela of the God. See, all these are different means to train your mind. By dharmanushtana, one is able to mumukshatva, but in most cases, the spiritual impulse itself will be weak owing to mental dullness. That is, I have a desire. I say, look, I know the importance of moksha. I want to pursue moksha, but I am simply weak. I am simply too lazy to do. I am too lazy to get up in the morning. We all face this a lot. I'm simply lazy. I am too distracted and lazy. I cannot sit for even 10 minutes to perform a small puja. So these are all aspects of the weakness of the mind. And unless the mind is made strong and the power of the will harnessed, the Ichha Shakti is utilized, is harnessed and used in application, will be difficult to strengthen the impulse of mumukshatva. And this becomes 100 times more complicated by the fact that people are very proud of their accomplishments, of their name, fame, wealth, and what is their self image. We all have our self image, and in our self image, we are the uh, most best person, we are the most accomplished, we are the most beautiful, we are the most rich, or whatever the self image that different people tell themselves. This prevents us, this act as a hindrance that prevents us to disconnect from material pleasure and work on the spiritual impulse. And the only way to rectify it is through yoga, dhyana, and bhakti. As one starts practice of upasana, for example, a meditation on one form of a deity, it may be Kali, it may be Vishnu, it may be Shiva, whatever, it may be Ganapati. As one starts this bhakti, it may be bhakti in the form of meditation, bhakti in the form of puja, bhakti in the form of mantra japa, whatever be the way. If one starts to increase the willpower and one pointed concentration, which is ekagra chitta that I referred earlier, this in turn helps one to overcome mental dullness, the laziness, the whatever the inertia, the different form of inertia that is left here in us. And since upasana involves taking refuge in deity, even when you practice Patanjali Yoga, there is one of the important niyama which is Ishvara Pranidhana, surrendering to the deity, surrendering to Ishvara. So upasana, whatever be the form, it involves an element of taking refuge in the deity by surrendering oneself, one's desires, one's fruits of actions, one's ego, one's even sense of doership at the feet of the deity. So by surrendering one's ego and pride through such upasana, one overcomes them also. So in other words, upasana leads us to control of the mind, indriya nigraha, the control of the mind and the senses, and the development of qualities such as shatka sampati, that is shama, dama, uparati, shraddha, and samadhan. See how these are all mapping coming together now. The practice of use of kriya shakti and practice of dharma anushtana by using kriya shakti and by developing and strengthening kriya shakti led to attainment of chitta shuddhi. By kriya shakti we removed the impurities of the mind and attained chitta shuddhi and mumukshutvam, developed desire for moksha. And now through the practice of upasana, which involves strengthening and utilization and further harnessing and application of Ekagra Chittam, our application of our Ichha Shakti, we attained Ekagra Chitta, by which we are able to develop Indriya Nigraha, Shraddha, Uparati, Samadhana, Shamadama, etc. qualities. So Madhyama Charitra constitutes the second tier of Vedantic path, and it represents overcoming of the qualities like dullness and pride represented by Mahishasura through the development of qualities such as Shatka Sampatti, which and the whole thing is accomplished by upasana, which involves invoking, strengthening, and harnessing Ichha Shakti. So through the application, through the development and harnessing and strengthening and application of Kriya Shakti and Ichha Shakti, we are able to attain the important aspects of Sadhana Chatushtaya, which are Chitta Shuddhi, Mumukshutva, and Shatka Sampatti. Now moving further, the last Charitra, Uttar Charitra, which corresponds to third tier of the Vedantic path, which is Vichara, as well as the important tenets of Sadhana Chatushtaya, which are needed for Vichara, that is Viveka and Vairagya. And who is the deity who will assist us in this? Which is Mahasaraswati, The Dhyana Shloka for the Uttama Charitra is Dhyana Shloka of Mahasaraswati, and she is the personification of Jnana Shakti. So there are three forms of Shakti: Kriya Shakti, Ichcha Shakti, and Jnana Shakti. And Mahasaraswati is personification of Jnana Shakti. She is Jnana Shakti itself. And it is she who removes our avidya, the ignorance, the primordial ignorance, and imparts Atma Jnanam. And her worship is inevitable for those who desire Atma Jnanam and Moksha. And in Uttara Charitra, Mahasaraswati, by taking up manifesting different forms of Devi, she slays different asuras, and this order in which the asuras are slayed are also significant. The asuras slayed in this Uttama Charitra are the important ones are Dhumralochana, Chanda, Munda, Raktabija, Nishumbha, Shumbha, respectively. And Nishumbha and Shumbha are the main asuras who are killed at the very last. Dhumralochana, let us briefly see each of these asuras. Dhumralochana means one with smoky eyes. Dhumra means smoky color. Or if we have to interpret it a bit, one with smoky eyes means one with a mistaken or a confused perception. One who do not have correct understanding, correct perception, who is confused. What is this? This is nothing but avidya. Due to ignorance or avidya, we take this world as permanent and real and pursue material pleasures mindlessly. On the other hand, we reject sometimes the notion of Ishvara or Brahman or Devata as completely non-existent. So this is basically what a confused perception is all about. We take what is unreal as real and what is real as unreal. This confused perception due to avidya is represented by Dhumralochana. And this is removed, this is rectified by its opposite, the correct perception, which in the language of Adi Shankaracharya is Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. The realization that Brahman alone is real, the Brahman, the substratum of the universe, the Ishvara is alone is real, and the Jagat, the world of names and forms, is Mithya, is temporary, is unreal. And this distinction between what is truly real, what is truly unreal, this knowledge is called as Viveka, or discriminatory power. And this is achieved only by the employment of Jnana Shakti. Because after all, removing wrong perception by correct perception involves using of knowledge, right? The power of knowledge, which is Jnana Shakti. And this happens in the traditional framework when one approaches a guru and one studies and contemplates upon Shastras and so on and so forth. The next asura is Chanda and Munda. They both represent Krodha. The etymological meaning refers to Krodha or extreme feelings of anger and revenge. Munda literally actually means, the etymologically actual meaning of Munda is one who cuts off others' heads. See the kind of anger and revenge. You know, if you defy me, I will kill you. I will cut off your head. That is a kind of revenge or anger that Chanda and Munda represent. And as long as we are attached to the worldly objects, we will remain insecure and unsatisfied. Which results in frustration, anger, and feelings of intense revenge. Just imagine, we intensely desire something, but we are unable to procure that object of desire, the material object. Then we develop frustration, we develop insecurity. And when we see somebody else achieving the same thing, then we develop resentment towards that person. Moreover, if that some person, if for example, I wanted a promotion, but my colleague got that promotion instead of me, then I not only have a feeling of resentment, I have a feeling of absolute disdain, absolute feelings of revenge towards that person, thinking that he has wronged us. So the only antidote for this never-ending cycle of frustration, anger, and feelings of revenge is what Vedanta, or the antidote for Krodha, anger, is what Vedanta calls as Titaksha. Adi Shankaracharya, it basically means patience and forbearance. Shankaracharya in Viveka Chodamani defines it as sahanam sarvadukkanam apratayakara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sat titaksha vidiyate. Sahanam sarvadukkanam, to forbear, to patiently forbear all the dukkha, all the sorrows, to patiently endure them without apratikara purvakam, without a feeling of revenge, without a need, without a impulse to take pratikara, to take revenge upon somebody. And second criteria, second line is also important. Chinta vilapa rahitam. Chinta vilapa, without a worry. It is not that somebody is hurting us and then we just take it lying down as a kind of a one without powerless person and we are suffering internally. No, no. Titaksha is not about uh, enduring injustice, enduring everything in from a powerless position of powerlessness. No, Titaksha is that it is not that you have to endure injustice, endure adharma. Titaksha means that whatever life throws at you, good or bad, you approach it in an unattached manner. You approach it with forbearance. You do not give rise to impulse of anger, impulse of instant response. You do not give rise to worry. You do not give rise to frustration, anger, and other such feelings. You stay calm, you stay rooted, and do what is necessary to be done. But you stay calm and keep your mind free of these negative qualities such as uh, revenge and anger, because they do not help you in the long run. Even for fighting adharma, the intense emotional urge that arises from revenge, etc., may give you boost in a temporary manner, but it will be harmful in a long run because it clouds your judgment and you miss the larger picture. So the way the Devi slays these different Rakshasas in all the three Charitra also shows how she slayed them without giving rise to urges of human forms of emotion. You can see that Devi in certain portions of Durga Mahatmya develops intense anger, but that anger is not our anger. That anger is not born out of frustration or attachment. That anger is the manifestation of fierceness of energy that slays the asura. She is detached. You can see her detachment even while she is slaying the asura in the battle. And that is what Krishna also suggests Arjuna, do your duty for the duty's sake, for Swadharma. Do it in a Sthita Pragya manner. So this Titaksha is all about that. And the strong Titaksha comes from, again, by the deployment of Jnana Shakti. So strong Vivekam will give rise to strong Titaksha, which in turn will slay the demons of anger and revenge. Why? Because only when one is able to recognize the futility of pursuing worldly objects, because they are impermanent, one realizes that there is no scope for frustration for not attaining them, no scope for revenge or anger for somebody else attaining them. So we become detached. Viveka, Titaksha, and this in turn gives rise to Vairagya. That comes in the context of Raktabija, one of the most important and most fascinating asuras. She is the third in line to be killed by in the Uttama Charitra. Rakta Bija means seeds of blood. Bija means seed. Rakta means blood. But Rakta also means desire. And hence this Asura, Rakta Bija Asura, is a personification of the seeds of desire. And desire, like Rakta Bija, is hard to kill. You know the story of Rakta Bija, right? Once you try to kill, one drop of blood falls on the ground, it gives rise to another Rakta Bija Asura. So 100 drops falls on the ground, there is 100 Rakta Bijasura, each of equal strength. Desire is like that. You kill the desire, one desire, by either fulfilling them or suppressing them, then 10 others rise in its place in the mind. No matter how many worldly desires you fulfill, there will be 10 times more desire which will take its place. You cannot overcome desire by forcefully suppressing them also. because it will manifest in some other way. So what is the way out? The only solution is vairagya or dispassion, which alone can completely uproot the desire root and stem. And this again rises to Jnana Shakti and Vivekam. Only when we have Viveka in the knowledge that Brahman alone is real, this worldly desires, worldly names and forms are unreal, they are changing. It is here today, it is not here tomorrow. They cannot give us permanent happiness. Only when this knowledge arises in our mind, a firm conviction arises in our mind that the worldly objects cannot give us permanent happiness, then we become naturally dispassionate towards them. We disconnect ourselves from these desires and pursue that only that true happiness, the permanent happiness, which is nothing but attaining Brahman. Brahman is Satchidananda Brahma. Ananda is Ananda Swarupa, and that Ananda is the only true happiness. So Goddess Chandika, having thus destroyed various internal asuras from Madhu Kaitaba to Raktabija, using Kriya Shakti and Icha Shakti and Jnana Shakti, this facilitates the development of required competencies of Sadhana Chatushtaya. Till now, the Sadhana Chatushtaya is complete. Viveka, Vairagya, Titaksha, Shatka Sampatti, and Mumukshutvam. So, Kriya, Icha, and Jnana, all of we have got. Now, further, we still have two asuras left, and they represent the next stage, the third stage of the final stage of Vedantic path, which is Vichara. The final stage of spiritual seeking, whatever be the path in a sense. This final frontier is represented by the story of Chandika's killing, the slaying, the destruction of Nishumbha and Shumba. Nishumba and Shumba are very great, very powerful asuras like Mahishasura and others, are very powerful. And Shumba and Nishumba represent Ahankara and Mamakara. Etymologically, they actually represent killing. And Nishumba, basically the Ni in Nishumba reinforces the quality of Shumba, which is killing. So why have I interpreted it in a form of Ahankara and Mamakara? The feeling of I-ness. This is me, that is me, I am this body, I am this mind, I am Nitin, I am this person, I am a student, I am a teacher. This is I-ness. And that Mamakara is mineness. I own this house, this is my family, this is my profession, this is my money. So I-ness and mineness, Ahankara, Mamakara. I am this and all this belong to me. These two feelings, Nishumba and Nishumba. Though they literally mean killing, what are they killing in reality? In Ishavasya Upanishad, my recent book is an English commentary on Ishavasya Upanishad. You can check it out. It's available on Amazon. In Ishavasya Upanishad, the third verse, shloka says, Asurya namate loka andena. I don't remember the exact shloka now, but it says in the second part of the shloka, it says, Atmahano janaha. The slayers of the self, they attain the Asurya loka, the loka of the Asuras, the world of Asuras, or the world of darkness. Who? The slayers of the self. Is it referring to suicide? No. Here, the killing of the self refers to a metaphorical killing of our real self, of our real Atman, which is Satchidananda Brahman, by our avidya or ignorance and its rejection. And this is caused by the feelings of Ahankara and Mamakara. The Ahankara and Mamakara makes us to falsely identify with body-mind complex and become attached to these worldly objects as our belonging to us. I mentioned this earlier. This false identification, saying that I am this body, I am this mind, results in a metaphorical killing of our real identification, which is I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Atma Brahman, my Atma is Brahman. So this real identification, this reality, this Atman is actually killed, so to speak, because of this false identification. And this false identification in fact leads to the extreme in the form of atheism, wherein we say God does not exist. Ishvara does not exist. So this Ishvara does not exist is a statement, in a sense, is a killing of Ishvara, right? In the West, there is a famous statement, God is dead. And Nishumba is what reinforces the quality of Shumba, which is the killing, which is a reference to how the mamakara, the mindness, or that these things belong to me, this feeling, this conviction that the worldly objects belongs to me, reinforces the conviction that I am this body and mind. The mindness reinforces I-ness, the way Nishumba reinforces Shumba. And both of them together suppress the true nature of self and metaphorically killing the self. So the only way to overcome these asuras of ahankara and mamakara is through the process of vichara or self-inquiry, which first separates the self from non-self entities. The Atma Anatma Viveka, as it is said, there is Atma is understood as what it is not, that it is not Anatma, it is not non-self entities. What are these non-self entities? The body, mind, senses, all these are not non-self entities, they are Anatma. Our Atma, our true self is distinct from that. And then finally, this vichara causes the self to subsume even the non-self entities, resulting in Atman alone as shining in the real state without any obstruction. What does this subsuming here mean? First, we realize that Atma is something distinct from Anatma. But then, when one sadhana, once nididhyasa matures, there comes a stage when one attains Atma Jnana, Atma Sakshatkara, which is basically an Akhandakara Vritti Jnana, wherein Aham Brahmasmi Vritti Jnana, wherein Aham Brahmasmi means I am everything. Because Brahman is the substratum of the universe. Aham, I am everything. So everything becomes subsumed in the notion of self. As it is said again in Vijavasi Upanishad, in the fifth or sixth verse, I think, sixth verse, it says, Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyeva anupushyati. We perceive a person who perceives entire objects, all the objects of the universe within his Atman, and his Atman within all the objects. Therefore, Atman alone exists. So this is what happens. First, self is distinguished from non-self, and then self is perceived in everything, including what was previously understood as non-self entities. So self alone exists. This shining of the self, this realization of self, this realization of true nature of Atma is Atma Jnanam or Brahmatma Aikya Jnanam or Brahma Jnanam, however you call it. This is the real state of moksha. This subsuming of non-self entities into the self due to the destruction of ignorance is Atma Jnana, and Uttara Charitra represents this final tier of the Vedantic path, wherein using this vichara or self-inquiry, which employs Jnana Shakti. Of course, this involves Jnana Shakti, right? To contemplate, to meditate upon the real nature of self is employment of Jnana Shakti, because Jnana alone removes Ajnanam. Knowledge alone can remove ignorance. So, using this vichara, which employs Jnana Shakti, one destroys the asura of Shumba and Nishumba, the asura of Ahankara and Mamakara, and attains Atma Sakshatkara, which is nothing but moksha. I think it's already time. I've taken 10 minutes more than that. I'll just concluding. Is this Vedantic interpretation really is far-fetched? One might ask, is it far-fetched, or is it really embedded in the text? I would like to quote from another text, Devi Atharvashisham, which appears in Rigveda and Atharva Veda. And this small text is also usually chanted in the traditional way of chanting Durga Saptashati. There are certain elements, certain texts which are chanted in the beginning of Parayana and towards the end of that Parayana. So in the beginning of the Parayana, one of the texts that is read, there is Kavacha, Kilaka and all. One of them is Devi Atharvashisham. In this text, the Devi herself, the great goddesses, herself describes who she is. Now, the Devas approach Mahadevi and ask her, "Oh, great goddess, who are you? Who really are you?" And she gives a very lengthy description of who she really is. And as you can see in the presentation, I've just quoted 3 verses. I've just read out the translation. She says, "I am the very essence. I am the very form, Swarupa of Brahman. From me, this universe in the form of Prakriti and Purusha is generated, which is both void and non-void." This reminds us of the Taittiriya Upanishad definition, Yato Bhutani Jayante. Know that as Brahman, from which this all the Bhuta has taken birth, in which all the objects are sustained and into which all the objects merge. She is saying that I am the very essence of that Brahman. And she says, I am both bliss and non-bliss. I am the knowledge and I am non-knowledge. I am the existence and I am non-existence. I am the Panchabhuta and other than Panchabhuta. I am the whole perceived universe. I am the Veda and Aveda. I am the learning and I am the ignorance. I am the unborn and also the born. The unborn is Nirguna, Nirakara, Parabrahma. The born is Saguna, Sakara, Hiranyagarbha. I am up, down, and in the middle. I am everywhere. So Devi is, who is then Devi? So as far as Atharvashesha, Devi Atharvashesha is considered, she is the essence and substratum of all deities, be it Rudra, Indra, Vasu, Aditya, Vishnu, and it is she who sustains and cherishes each of them. She points out that she is the first among those worthy of worship. She is the very essence of all deities. She who receives the worship and grants the fruit of all worshipper. In short, Devi Chandika, the primordial Shakti, is none other than Upanishadic Brahman. She is Brahman itself. She is Brahman spoken of in a feminine form. So, as a conclusion, I would like to quote Sri Subhash Kak, who in one of his book describes this Devi Mahatmya, the text as presenting an account of what Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati do to bring about the transformation of Prakriti, not Prakriti from Tamas to Rajas, from Rajas to Sattva, and from Sattva to Supreme Vijaya, which is mastery in the Absolute. And we have seen this throughout this presentation, that Chandika is none other than Upanishad Brahman, who through triple forms of Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati, representing Kriya Shakti, Ichcha Shakti, and Jnana Shakti, facilitates the performance of dharma, upasana, and vichara, leading one to the ultimate goal of moksha. And of course, it goes without saying that the asuras and different forms of Supreme Devi that are enunciated in Saptashati are not mere metaphors. They are not mere internal processes. As an individual sadhaka, understanding the internal spiritual process, understanding the spiritual map of our the kind of a spiritual landscape on which we have to make journey is important. But they are real cosmic beings. The Chandika is real. Her diverse forms are real. The asuras are real. These events are cosmic events, which are real events. These diverse forms of Devi are the manifestations of Supreme Shakti, and the worship of Divine Mother through systematic ritual procedures will lead to seeker on the path of moksha. So, Legend of Chandika provides a deep insights into the theoretical as well as practical aspects of sadhana, and it is my hope that through this presentation you'll be able to better appreciate the Durga Saptashati as a whole, and uh, take home the important points that how upasana, how different modes of sadhana, be it swadharma anushtana, be it upasana in the form of dhyana, mantra sadhana, and yoga, etc., leads one to chitta shuddhi, leads one to ekagra chitta, and which ultimately makes one eligible to practice Vedanta sadhana, which eventually culminates in Vedanta moksha, which will happen over many lives. It is not that everything will happen in this life. So with this, I like to conclude my session. And again, I want to thank Kalari Grama and Deepa ji for approaching me and giving me this platform to speak. And any more questions you have, if you have any questions, you can ask me. And all my books are available on Amazon. Please check it and you can read them. Thank you. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Namaste, Nitin. It was a fantastic talk. I follow you on Twitter and Instagram, and I remember messaging you. And I had made a sincere request. I come from a Vedantic school of thought, and I had not understood the essence of Shakti. So I had made a sincere request, Mate, help me understand you, help me get to you. And I think, things manifest itself, and had the great pleasure to listen to your talk. Very fantastic research. And I think the parallels drawn between the Durga Saptashati and the Vedantic, the Shankara's commentaries and the books of Shankara's on leading, the qualifications of the Adhikari and what needs to be done. I think that was spot on. Great work, Nitin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitinji, and thank you, Mukundji. I don't think I can summarize it better than him, so I won't even try. Thank you for making the time, and namaste. Namaste.